Ay, caramba. Mamma mia. Hello, everyone. Starting a bit early today. I know. I usually start at 6:30. But I'm starting a bit early, seeing a fair amount about Hawker. And it's, a fun time to chat about them. Plus, honestly, everything was ready, and starting early seemed a good idea. It really did. Now, of course, there are going to be several stars of things I'm going to talk about today. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is this book, Hawker Aircraft, by Francis K. Mason since 1920. And it's Hawker Aircraft since 1920 by Francis K. Mason. And it is an absolute font of knowledge and font of information. But it's not the only book which was used today. And this is where my little tidy up, which I've had earlier, was probably not the most sensible thing I ever did. Because one of the things I did while tidying up was put books away and try and reorganize books so I had things organized. Now, this sounded like a good idea in my head. But unfortunately, this has meant that some books have gone for a right royal wonder, including my specifications book. Hey, caramba. That's on me, though. There have been a few interesting comments coming recently about various videos. All good stuff. I'm happy to have some good points made. I have to say there was one which I was sort of going... Well, there's one on the Dreadnoughts, which is certainly going to be responded to. That's going to be responded. But also, I wanted to say thank you to everyone who has been commenting, who has been... I mean, as I still am learning this, I still am... I realised today, and this is one of the reasons why I started a bit early today, that when I looked up my videos, and specifically my lives... Now, today is the 6th of May. And if I go back to the earliest lives, I have now been doing lives for over a year. I didn't realise that. And when you consider it, the first ever episode of Brew Ships took place on the 3rd of May 2020. And I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. I honestly didn't realise this. I realised I'd started in March, sort of end of March, beginning of April last year. I didn't realise I'd managed to get well over the year mark of doing these videos, and the only reason I've managed to get all this year going and do this for a year has been thanks to all of you. So I wanted to say thank you, basically. So that's why I started a bit early today, because I had everything prepped and I wanted to talk a bit about Hawker, and I wanted to say thank you. I honestly didn't expect this to be to be still going a year later. I thought that I would probably have a few viewers who would be interested, and then basically it would peter out and people wouldn't be that interested, and it would be fun. But it wasn't. I didn't expect it to become as important to me as it has become, and I didn't expect it to be as fun as it has been. It's been it's a huge amount of fun, and it's still going to keep going. And I just want to say thank you. Wayne Borean, I can't say, I just wanted to warn you that the Swedish metal band Sabaton asked for suggestions for good historical song themes. I recommended the Three Battles in Narvik and you and Drax videos. Woohoo! I like Surbiton. I have to say, if they do the Battles of Narvik, I would absolutely love to listen to the Battles of Narvik. Hell, I'd like to. I don't know. Do they allow guest rivals? Seriously, I played a trombone. I'm not sure that they have a space for a wacky naval historian trombonist in it, because if they can, I will find a way to get in there. You know. I'm not sure. I've been getting a lot of comments there about the HMS Manchester bit in the town class, and I'm sort of looking at those ones and going, is that the case? And that's one of the reasons why looking at some of the comments which had come in on some of the older videos was what made me realise I'd been doing this for every year. I thought it was the end of May for some reason. I thought it was coming up. I had all sorts of things preparing, and then I realised I'm already into the 13th month, 14th month almost. It's just amazing. That was Drax's response too. Yes. Trombone is indeed metal. Big and brassy, but metal. And it's gorgeous, a trombone. I have both a regular trombone and a bass trombone. So I have tenor and bass, because I spent quite a lot of my childhood being a trombonist in jazz bands and big bands. I was lead trombonist of my school's big band. We were considered so good. We won the national youth competition so many times. They told us, they decided we were professional and couldn't enter it again. Well, that's what we were told by our head of school. Oh, which was kind of funny. I am just sending a link for all this to the various people who get links. So thank you, everyone. Copied and today. Right then. Ooh, thank you, teachers about naval history. It's a pleasure to be here and chat. Hello, DGV40. Hello, John Shea. Hello, Wayne Borean, of course, again. Hello, Bart Foster. Hello, Rick Vasava. Hello, Agnes Flo. Hello, Shumi. Hello, Pitminter. Hello, Bill Tridget, formerly Old Richard. Hello, Carl Gasberg. Hello, John Shea. Hello, Nook. Hello, Paul from Chicago. Here comes the story of Hurricane, the airplane the Germans came to blame for shooting them down a ton. Spitfire gets the love for something they've never done. Honestly, the Spitfire gets all the blame and all the love. It's quite sad. The Hurricane gets ignored. But probably that's because the Spitfire is the product of the plucky little company which could. The Hurricane is the product of Hawker, which were, by World War II, about as big as an aviation engineering company could get. Now, I'm not being rude. I'm putting this in its case before I forget to put it in its case, and then it gets damaged. It goes in the red case. I'm now up to red in the colour of my portable hard drives. I started right down at magenta. And I'm slowly working my way through every single colour, not in the rainbow, no, every single colour on the colour wheel, I think. I'm up to about 40 portable hard drives. Alright. Hello, Frank Spasada. Whenever I tidy up, I can never find anything again for months. Agreed. Although I have been told that my office is now turning into Uber Naval Historian Office, because I have random bags down here of stuff from my car, mainly because and my car's going to be get cleaned, and it's an estate, but I've currently got all the bed down because I've been taking stuff to the dump and it's going to get cleaned and all sorts of things. So that's come from my car, and I've got tools beneath a fleece, and I've got books everywhere. Yeah, I am apparently in ultimate naval historian office mode. Hi, Steve Richards. Next one. Any good Navy bands? The Royal Marines. Big bands forever. It didn't mean a thing if it ain't gonna swing. That's true. To be fair, though, the most fun you can ever have as a trombonist in big band music is probably Tuxedo Junction. Because that just end note where you just hold it for as long as you can, you dance the trombone around as much as you can without letting the sound fluctuate, and that's the thing, because you have to tune your mouth to keep with your movements, so you have to practice it quite a lot. It always looks sort of, jazzy, but it has to be very practiced and choreographed. It's fun. You can also, I will speak this as this because I had one. The trombones usually sit at the front of the big band because we're doing that. Or we sit off to one side and everyone else is sort of to the other side of us, but we have our own space. I had a new teacher came in after our previous teacher, and they thought trombones should sit at the back and do up there as slides and up above. After 3 saxophonists had their heads cracked by trombone slides, not at all on purpose, just because you want us to do the jazzy movements, but you also want us to go on the sides and the saxophonist in front of us. It got changed back to the way it was supposed to be. But I always remember that because, to be honest, that was a very practical demonstration to me in how you have to take into account a lot of things when you're positioning your forces. And it's the same if you're lining out your ship or you're lining out your aircraft. You have to work out what's going to go where. And you might end up, if you're trying to go for very, very thin wings, you might end up with machine guns rather than a cannon, because you can use the various systems to keep a machine gun warm enough to fire, whereas the cannon's going to be too exposed to, and going to freeze up. Alan, I'm late in the camera via Drac, so I still have lots of your back catalogue to work through. I think a few people do. I don't know, Alan, 6040. What's going in its case? The hard drives. Yes, the hard drives. Oh, Johnson, there's no room for the model railway. There will be in a model railway. Trust me, there will be in a model railway. And that's going to be where the pictures are going to be along that wall there. I have had this conversation with, as you all know, my primary building person, aka Drac, who comes in and helps me with this stuff, and yeah, we are working out there's going to have to be more shelves added in at various spots around the room. Hello, Ian Carr. Hello, Greg. Hello. Made Latter-day biplane, blessed the lady, Latter-day Glenn Miller. Yes. Dylan Lillaire. Putting trombones at the back can work. You just need the roll-out holds to do so. Pretty much. If you want to put the trombones at the back, you need to have us up on a raised seating area and back. Give us space. Do not put us in a space where, how can I put it? If the trombone line is where that wall was, this particular teacher had the idea of putting us about here. And the trombone will sort of fit in that space until you start moving the slide. Eating Roland Cash. Frank Smelter, have you watched Seinfeld? A while ago. There will be a model railway even if the books must end up on the floor to have it. There will eventually be bookshelves down there. Believe it or not, the fridge has arrived. There'll be space. The fridge is going to go in this area, and this is going to be left quite open exactly for that, and to allow that sort of. And there is going to be more shelving actually for the model railway trains to be stored underneath here, which is why this is the shape it is. Going to have a sort of some tracks down here to store extra trains off the tracks. Currently, it's my wood store. Mm-hmm. Cash, an amazing book on this subject, Empire of the Clouds by James Hamilton Pearson. Yeah, it is a very good book. I think I have it in one of my boxes. In Carl, has Drac done a structural survey of the book loadings? Let's put it this way. We're going to be shoving in more concrete underneath the concrete. I will look forward to the P139B 3D model. You're early. I am sort of early, yes. But I have a reason for being early, as it was. And the reason, this is Hawker AK Sotworth, is because those are two of the buildings I work in at Kingston University. This is where my office is, the Sotworth building. So when I actually am in work rather than working from home, which is what most of me and my colleagues are doing at the moment, my office is in this building 2 days a week. 1 day a week, I'm in this building. Well, to be fair, actually, I'm off slightly to the left of that building in the older part of the construction, but I tend to go and do some teaching in there. So, this is the Sotworth building. This is the Hawker wing. This is my university. Hawker is one of those companies which I have a huge amount of interest in because I literally work in the university that's built on the places that they were manufacturing. Well, started out, some bits of it have moved around, some bits are still built on places which they used, and still exists their heritage. This is where I go and teach aero engineers to this day, and mechanical engineers. We have a wonderful Formula One department that is a real fast track into Formula One racing if you're interested in it. They have a great aerospace department which has humongous connections with NASA and the European Space Agency as well, and the British and the satellite company. So all that, but this building, Sotworth building, where my office is, where my sister's labs are. My sister has her labs in here, and this is one of the great things when people sort of look and go, "What do you mean labs?" My sister, her area of engineering is so specialized. She has her own labs. She has her own office space. Space probably about 3 times the size of this office in that building, which is full of machines which can only be used if my sister has to sign them off and agree them because they're her machines for her research. She can loan them to other people to use for their research, but they're her machines. So this is part of my connection to Hawker, and this is one of the reasons why I want to do this company. But if you don't mind, I just need to kill an ant. Now you're off the mousepad. I found out, by the way, where the ants are coming. They kept dropping on me from the ceiling. They seem to be coming up on the inner wall and then dropping out the ceiling on me. So I am going to deal with that one. Guys, read Trombone. After the Imperial March, arguing against trombone in metal genre is a disturbing lack of faith. That's why I wasn't arguing against it. Shanef, in my experience, new creatures are very much like new subalterns. They both insist on reinventing the wheel. True. To be fair, this wasn't the worst teacher I ever had to deal with at school, because I was a senior. I was quite senior in the prefects. We had some fun times with teachers, including one who had to basically they were supposed to be a trainee teacher, and the only way we found that we could actually have a class under their control was if there was a prefect sitting in the back of the room. Read Drac being Davros. Has it anything to do with historical reenactment? No, it doesn't. It had to do with him having a tray over his lap and looking like he was Davros. Oh my gosh, what are officers? Is that something from the Default Times? Yes. Peter Dawson, not sort of early, very early. Well, to be fair, I got XSplit working. And I wanted to say thank you because I've now been doing this for nearly 14 months, it seems. So I hadn't realised I'd gone past the 12-month mark without realising it on marking anyway. So I wanted to say thank you to everyone. So I thought, XSplit's working. I'll get in and get started. How did the railcar restoration go? Anuk, you can carpool with your sister post-COVID. No, we cannot carpool. Under any circumstances can we carpool. At all. I love her dearly. But there is actually a legitimate reason we can't carpool. Because her primary office is actually in this building, because she's in charge of all the foundation students, which are run out of the Roehampton Vale campus, which was on Twitter the other day because they had ducks crossing the road not far from it. So that's where my sister's primarily based, but her lab is at the Penryn Road campus, where I'm primarily based. So actually, I spend half my... I often have to pop down and check on her lab for her and check it's all working. But I'm based in one campus, she's based in the other. And then we swap around one day a week. And I only work for Kingston University 3 days a week. So I'm there, I appear, I do 2 days here, and then 1 day here, and then I'm gone for the rest of the week and go, well, hey! Long weekend. Show me to your archives. But my sister does most of her week up here and visits here occasionally to do her research. Money Secret, what is about Drac being Davros? It's on the latest bilge pumps, and pretty much we logged in to find him eating what could have been brains, but turned out to be sweet and sour chicken, out of a bowl on top of a tray on his lap. Being a podcast, only Dr. Clark got a visual, but yeah, it's a visual which we wouldn't want. Sharing would not be good for people. Sharing would not be caring. But no. So, Kingston University is a cool university, and one of those things, because there's been a lot of talk recently, and I know I'm going off the topic of Hawker, but it's on the topic of Hawker. There's been a lot of discussion recently about STEM courses versus humanities in terms of funding, and history departments getting closed down in various universities. And honestly, I could see that happening in Kingston. I love Kingston, but I could see the department being closed. I don't think it will be. I hope it won't be, because the history department is very good there. They are just not good at publicising the fact. And it's like the engineering department. The engineering department is where I work. I don't work in the history department. I teach history of engineering. I teach academic skills. I am not a member of the history department. I'm a member of the engineering department, of the science, engineering, and computing teams. Because primarily the historians don't want to do at the university don't want to do my job. That's fine. I don't mind. It gives me a job. It's lovely. But we are a world-class engineering university. We really are. one of the really strange things is that when you look at us on league tables, because the league tables are research emphasized, we don't have as much research staff as other universities, so we don't do as well on the research tables. But when you do things like looking at companies coming and hiring our students or things like that, they beat down our doors. If you want to actually do engineering after you graduate from university, Kingston is one of the universities to go to. It's a really, really good engineering course. Civil engineering, aero engineering, aerospace engineering, mechanical engineering. It is really, really good. They have excellent master's programs, excellent bachelor's programs, and a wonderful PhD program. And I know because I work with all three levels. And I can say it because I'm the guy who is a contract lecturer who's outside. Honestly, they don't pay me enough that they're going to bribe me to say anything. But I can say it. It's brilliant lecturing, and they do a lot of very hard work. They are terrible at advertising themselves. I mean, literally. Kingston University and so many of these smaller universities, less well-known universities, are so bad at advertising themselves. And you see it is because the big universities, King's College, where I got my PhD, Oxford and Cambridge, I've gone and taught them. They're lovely universities. They don't need to advertise themselves. They have this status. They have this great... And every time I see someone come up with the idea of, oh, let's turn Oxford and Cambridge into postgraduate-only universities, because that will magically solve all our problems, because they won't be able to take bachelor students. And I go, that won't, because what are you going to do about King's College London, Imperial College London, London School of Economics, University of Manchester, University of Birmingham? These are big freaking hoovers, which will gobble up those students. Quite happily. They've got the reputation. The main problem is for these other universities, and Kingston is a good example, as great and as wonderful as the courses are, they are terrible at advertising them. I mean, literally, if I was one of these universities, my first thing would be to go out to every single careers advisor at a school within 100 miles of me and invite them to my university. I would invite them to come for a day. I would pay their expenses. I would bring them to the university and I would show them the courses. I would introduce them to the academics. I would say, would you like an academic to come and visit and talk about our courses to your students? Would you like da-da-da-da-da? This is what we do. We offer engineering. These are our world-class engineering labs. These are our award-winning superstar engineers. Oh, and by the way, these are the big, massive companies which come and recruit our students that give them jobs when they graduate. I would say all that and I would get them in. But no, they send out a brochure or they do a bus advertisement or a radio advertisement, and you go, that's silly, because if you're advertising on a bus, you're expecting someone in the middle of the street to take your notice of all the other advertisements. You have a captive audience. They're in schools. They can't get away from the advisor. They literally can't. These annoying careers advisors or whichever member of staff is assigned to it can literally follow the sixth form round the school to talk to them. So, if they're a captive audience when they're there, what you will need to do is talk to the captor and make sure they know what a good product you are. That's the way. But no, sorry, that's my minor rant. Gary Jones, sorry, I tuned in late expecting to hear about Fury's hard times. The discussion has evolved considerably. No, it's going there. The reason I'm starting off in Kingston University is because this is my personal connection with Hawker, and one of the reasons I love Hawker, because this is the Sopwith building, that's the Hawker wing. This is at Penryn Road campus, this is at the Roehampton Vale campus. These are the buildings we teach engineering in Kingston. This is the very tangible link between Hawker and Kingston University, where I happen to work, and I happen to be proud to work because it's lovely. Kingston University is a former polytechnic. Yeah, it's still a good university. Zava Johnson, you are very kind to say I'm taking on Eric Grove's torch, but yeah, that I would love to think I'm that good, but I don't. I might, maybe in a few years I'll get there, but Eric Grove is just a massive, massive personality in person. Follow behind. Oh. Anyway, let's get on to Hawker. So, Hawker aren't Hawker to begin with. They're Sopwith. Sopwith went bankrupt as a result of World War One. And there is this beautiful line in this book. There is a beautiful line in this book which goes into it. And it is quite a massive book when it comes on all these things. Due largely to a lack of any coherent government policy towards aviation in general, and military aviation in particular, the years following the First World War were lean indeed when the aircraft industry was concerned. After squadron of the newly born Royal Air Force disbanded, until the fighter defence of Great Britain rested upon but a single squadron of Sopwith snipes. Nor was the slightest incentive in evidence to support and invigorate the industry, an industry that had scarce existed half a dozen years earlier. The emphasis lay in making do with the countless war surplus aircraft, with the result that many companies were obliged to eke out an existence on hospital contracts. T.O.M. Sopwith had courageously advocated the growth of commercial aviation, and had striven to place on the market a fairly wide range of civil aircraft until, through lack of adequate support and orders, the company was forced to seek continued existence in the manufacture of motorcycles and car bodies. However, successful though these products undoubtedly proved, the Sopwith company could scarcely pave its way. And when in 1920 the Treasury for excess of war profits duty lodged an enormous claim against the firm, the day of reckoning arrived. The year had witnessed heavy trading losses by the Sopwith company, yet had it been possible to write these off against the excess profits duty claim, the firm might have been in a position to continue its activities. Unfortunately, the claim could not be written off immediately, and so in order to protect the interests of creditors, it was deemed wise to put the affairs of the company in the hands of a receiver. To effect the necessary extreme measures of economy, the joint managing director, R.O. Carey, and the secretary, Musgrave, voluntarily relinquished their posts and left them vacant. Other savings were achieved by increasing the mortgages on the company premises, with the result that not only was the Treasury claim met in full, but the company was able to pay 20 shillings in the pound to every creditor. Before the Sopwith Aviation Company was declared solvent once more, however, the new firm, H.G. Hawker Engineering Co. Ltd., was announced. Indeed, Harry Hawker, on learning Sopwith's difficulties, had been among the first to offer assistance, only to meet with Sopwith's determination to put his own house in order before making any plans to join in creation of a new company. Hawker did, nevertheless, suggest that he should take over the mortgage of the Cranberry Park Road premises, and by the time the formation notice was published, his company already occupied a large part of the Sopwith premises in Kingston. These big pictures, are actually all around Kingston University. If you want to go and see them, you can walk into the library at Roehampton Vale and see them. Well, you could pre-COVID. They might be changing the rules soon. And this is where Hawker comes into being. Hawker is Sopwith Mark II. And it's a good company. It's such a good company that Thomas Sopwith joins it, and they combine and they form Hawker Engineering into HG Hawker Engineering 1920. The company goes on to become Hawker Aircraft Limited, and then they managed to purchase Gloucester Aircraft Company in 1934, merged with Armstrong Siddeley in 1935, and acquired Avro as part of, or Avro, as part of this procurement. So Hawker, in their forms, are an engineering conglomerate. But in the 1930s, they are a major engineering firm. They have gone from Sopwith, which went bankrupt because of the British government going, "You've got to pay. You got excess profits in World War One. You pay them to me. Give them to me now." And they go bankrupt. And it's one of the excess war duty profit thing is one of the most stupid things the British government does in after World War One. It's because of a reaction to trying to pay back various debts and various things, and also it's a bit of a reaction against what was seen as some of the massive profits made. But honestly, Sopwith had been your critical area aviation engineering firm in the in World War One. Let's be honest, they have the Cuckoo, they produce the Camel, the Pup, the Snipe. So many critical aircraft come from Sopwith in World War One. I'm regularly asked by students, why don't exist by World War II? And I have to go, because they had to pay their tax bill. That is the question. They have to pay their tax bill. Hello, Jalenworth. Hello, Amy and Sungrass. As a result of World War One. Yep. Correct. The Latter Day biplane is driven by bunnies, according to the Dr. Clark. So rabbits in predator masks? Probably. Why did World War One bankrupt the Sopwith Company? They go bankrupt because of this tax. They go bankrupt trying to pay that because the tax is being charged at the exact worst time for the aviation companies. It's why when you look at World War One, the companies making aircraft, and you look at World War Two, the companies making aircraft. The companies making aircraft in World War Two are often the companies which managed to survive, or which are part of massive other engineering conglomerates. The reason Vickers managed to buy so many aircraft companies, they end up owning Supermarine, is because Supermarine runs into trouble because of the legacy of World War One. Thanks for asking. Have you ever been to Bletchley Park? A while ago. John, did you have any of the books I bought? I'm jealous. I'm jealous of yours. I'm not jealous. I do have a couple of the books you bought. I don't have all of them. The reason I'm not jealous, and Carl, and don't take this the wrong way, is because I'll probably put them on order. But no, it's good to get good books. It's always good to have good books, and it's always good for people to have good books. And again, I will refer you to this. So, this is the other reason why when people start talking to me and they go, "Oh, why do you talk of Hawker and Supermarine as being naval aviation companies? Surely you should be talking about Fairey and Blackburn." And I go, well, yes, but actually when you look at it and look at the history, Supermarine and Hawker are critical firms in the 1920s and 30s for the Royal Navy's development. In World War One, Supermarine and Sopwith are critical firms for the Fleet Air for the Royal Naval Air Service. And if the Royal Navy had got its way, Hawker Sea Furies and the original Seafire or Seafang from Supermarine would have been their fighters in World War II. Because that's what they're ordering. And the Sea Fury, when it comes into existence, it's a specification done years earlier, comes into existence in 1943 as its first test flight after it's been held up due to issues. 1944, it's in the air. You know, the Sea Fury is a critical aircraft for the Royal Navy post-World War II. Hawker and Supermarine are the naval firms. And it's one of the funny things I find is that we associate them with the Royal Air Force and, you know, that sort of air group. And actually, when you look at them in the interwar period, they are more orientated around supplying the Fleet Air Arm than they are the Royal Air Force, other than the Heart. But that's a rare thing which basically proves the point. 1964. So they couldn't stay in business because the government said you owe taxes and no, you can't write off your losses. Pretty much. Seems like test pilots were as big a deal back then as they were post-World War II. Yes, Harry Hawker is a living god in the 1920s. Great Dominion, anyone could buy from Sopwith. They would happily sell to the Greeks, to anyone, and actually the Hawker make a lot of money taking up what would have been Sopwith contracts to various other countries. But also, you have to remember, Sopwith got into the building commercial aircraft, airliners, etc., and mail planes. Anime Cygnus. I'm normally in favour of taxing more companies to the edge of existence, but this is ludicrous. It is. It's in a case of, yeah, we're going to throw away Sopwith, this critical engineering firm, because they made too many profits supplying us aircraft in World War One. And the reason we feel they basically decide the Sopwith have been charging them too much, and they go, well, Sopwith go, well, we were having to make orders on the fly and pay over hand for everything, and they produced the receipts, and they just said, no, we don't believe you were really paying that much to the people, to the sub companies and the subcontractors. And it's a case of, yes, they were. Alexander, if the RN was responsible for making tanks, did any tank companies help in the naval field? Yeah, the companies which ended up having building the tanks were mostly companies which had a lot of connection with the Navy. Right, so Hawker has a few aircraft which they try off, and they do try to get some good aircraft going. They don't always have the best of success with them, but they start off with some good ideas. And the first one, really, that is good, really good aircraft, is the Woodcock. But it's not technically their first aircraft. Their first aircraft is technically the Duker. And the Duker is special. The Duker is just interesting. Duiker, and it has, and the trouble is, I can only find pictures of them in this book. I did try hunting them elsewhere, but they might be available elsewhere. But what can I do about the lights? Hang on. It's got a swept wing. That's the cool part about the Duker. I will see if I can find a way to give you a picture of it. Hang on. Let me do another search. No, there's no picture really showing the swept wing. There's no picture, but there is a fairly decent plan. So, that's going to appear in a second. And then we're going to get on to the Woodcock. Bam-ba-dam. And Hawker Duca. There you go. This is the Hawker Duca, which is Genesis for Hawker as far as they're concerned. But as I've said, let's be honest, Hawker are really Sopwith. No, it's not Iron Brew. I got no Iron Brew delivered today, despite ordering it, so I've run out of Iron Brew. However, I have my Coca-Cola mug, and I have a bottle of Coca-Cola. It's not the same. It's having to fill the hole. Dutchman, government is the biggest problem for a healthy economy. Yes and no. Government can be an assistance. Yeah. As I always say, you need a right-sized government. Ian Carr, Bristol acquired their engine business in the same fashion from a bankrupt after a woman. Yes. We need a lecture on paying for World War I. That would be a very big lecture to give. But I could probably do that with some of the books I have. Woodcock. Was there a stonecock? No. Now, the thing is, in the lovely Duca just doesn't get any attention. They were looking for a high-speed reconnaissance aircraft, and they didn't like it. Thank you, Carmen Gasbo. But Sopwith, Hawker, were not the types to be disturbed, so they come up with the Hawker Woodcock. Designed at the end of 1922 to meet the Air Ministry Nightfighter specification. It was initially the work of Captain Thompson, then chief designer of H.G. Hawker Engineering Company, but shortly before the first prototype flew, he was replaced by W.G. Carter in disappointment. W.G. Carter is a very, very cool engineer. So is Captain Thompson. This is the other thing. Hawker inherit, basically they are Sopwith, but then the new branding. They get all these excellent engineers and designers. They just have a massively unfair advantage. They really, really do. And let's be honest, the Woodcock could be a Sopwith aircraft. Look at its design. It was powered by an Armstrong Sigley Jaguar AS117A engine. Featured 2 bay wings, and unfortunately proved disappointing with an alarming degree of wing flutter in its early flights. However, and it's sort of critiqued almost out of existence. But the Jaguar is replaced with Bristol Jupiter engine. They incorporate single bay wings, as you can see here in this picture, and this was a much better aircraft. Unfortunately, the Jupiter 4 engine gave trouble, and so they move on to more engines, and more engines, and more engines. And eventually, after going through, I think it was 12 engines, they do go back to the Armstrong Siddeley Jaguar 2. Driving a 2-blade wooden propeller. And then eventually they end up with a Bristol Jupiter 4 driving another 2-blade wooden propeller. But, they're good. They're interesting aircraft, and see how many end up in service. They end up in service till 1928 in 2 squadrons. They are the night fighters for the Royal Air Force. How does it only have one crew member? I honestly do not know. I'll get the Duker out of the way so people don't get confused with the Duker and the Woodcock. But the Woodcock is... the Woodcock is just a special aircraft to me. I also would really think that any person flying something called the Woodcock is going to be in for a lot of bad jokes. I wouldn't make them myself, but oh my. Oh, you can definitely... That name would so not be brought back today. There are so many aircraft's names which are brought back. That would not be. Hannah Knight, Hannah Productions. There is someone else saying, hello, just got COVID-19 shot today. Wish me luck on getting no complications. I wish you luck, but I do recommend that if you have a COVID-19 shot, you have some good bath stuff nearby, because that was the only thing I found which helped my back when it was hurting. Yes, the Buffalo did start out as a biplane. I'm glad it's not just YouTube. YouTube is having trouble with some of these words. Microsoft Office wouldn't allow me to save the PowerPoint slide images under the title of the slide, the presentation as Hawker. They had a problem with it. When I changed it to Hawker Aircraft, it worked fine. Now, the thing about the Woodcock is that we can make jokes about it. It deserves to make jokes about it. It's armed with 2 machine guns. It's a night fighter. But the thing is, it's critical at its time in coming because it gives them a chance to get on their feet. They have an Air Ministry order. They have some breathing space. And this is really critical. But it's not where they stop. It's definitely not where Hawker stops. The next one is slightly more interesting for all of us. It's the Hedgehog. Yes. Designed to Air Ministry Specification 3722 during 1923, and first appearing in February 1924 under the company registration T2, the Hawker Hedgehog was a 3-seat fleet reconnaissance biplane of fabric-covered wooden construction. Now, here is the cute thing about this aircraft and the reason it's not taken up. However, by the time the Hedgehog had completed its trials, the Air Ministry cancelled the requirement, for it was not considered that the performance of the machine represented sufficient advance over such aircraft as the Avro Bison, the Blackburn, the Parnell Panther, all of which had yet to complete their first year of service. Nevertheless, the prototype was purchased from manufacturers, being serialized as N187 and flown back to Marsham on the Air Ministry experimental charge in February 1925 for further tests with dropping ailerons. Now, this aircraft is a pretty cool little aircraft. It's basically it's the Hawker's first, as Hawker, venture into producing a naval aircraft. But it comes with something. It's slower than the Blackburn. I mean, how? Maximum speed 120.5 miles per hour at sea level. A cruising speed of 89 miles an hour. I could comfortably outpace this in my car going backwards. Sorry, you didn't hear that. Forwards. Going forwards. And of course, only on roads which is legally permitted for me to do, i.e. private roads, racetracks. It took 23 minutes and 59 seconds to reach 10,000 feet. So why they didn't just say it took 24 minutes to reach 10,000 feet, I don't know. Was it very important to add that 59 seconds on? Because honestly, I feel like I'm almost... Well, I'm not quite reading it for so long that it takes to get there, but that was... interesting. Engineering endurance approximately 2.5 hours. And the thing was, this aircraft is very good at meeting the requirements they set in the specifications, because, and that's the reason I listed the specifications there, if we go to the specification from the British Army British aircraft specifications file, which you can buy, number 37 from 1922. But unfortunately, I opened it up into 1924. There we go. Beginning of 1923. Three-seater fleet reconnaissance aircraft. Avro Type 550 triplane was planned. The Blackburn R2 Airedale, which of course we talked about. The Bristol Type 87, the Fairy Ferret, the Handley Page HP-19, Hanley, and the Hawker Hedgehog. The specification was issued by the Air Ministry on behalf of the Admiralty, who were seeking a replacement for the Bison, Panther, Blackburn, and Panther. So that's the Avro Bison, Blackburn, and Parnell Panther. All of them failed. The Fairy Ferret was otherwise known as the Fairy 3E. The Bristol Type 87 is just... the Hanley, oh my lord. The Airedale... Well, the Airedale looks like someone had copied a Duiker. Very fast, it's marketing, under 24 minutes. How is it slurred? The aerodynamics is much nicer than the Blackburn. The rule of cool says the plane looks good, it'll fly good. Well, apparently the Hedgehog managed to beat that rule. Hedgehog, Sonic's first flyer plane. Probably. So when does Sidney Cam enter the picture? Yes, as Ian Carter pointed out, he joined in 1923 as a draftsman from Martinside, another bankrupt aircraft company. That is the other thing Hawker does. Harry Hawker is quite well off, and the other backers are quite well off, and Sopwith has managed to get money from somewhere, and so they go around and they hoover up the talent. You know, this is one of those companies where you're sitting there going, Why aren't you building more? You're famous for the Hurricane, but you could build so much more. Getting told off by your mum at work for being a 32-year-old sixth grader. Pump trucks are awesome scooters. Priceless. I'm enjoying education. Pump trucks are fun. But, yes. This is the picture of the hedgehog with its wings folded, and I just thought you might enjoy that. Because actually, that's a pretty cool thing they managed to. They were getting this as wings folded. It's one of the reasons why the Air Ministry wanted it and the Navy were interested in it. The wings folded. But also, think about the size of this aircraft. And by the way, that picture does come from the book. It's 12 foot 6 inches high. Even with the wings folded, it has a width of 16 feet, 7.5 inches. With the wings open, it has a span of 40 feet, 0.5 inches. It's colossal. It's a big aircraft. And that picture comes from this book, by the way. But the thing is, these lessons, these early defeats, well, the woodcock keeps them going, the hedgehog makes them feel slow, means they start thinking about what can we do. How can we make our aircraft better? In car, outside the scope of this, but Sidney Cam goes on to design the Hawker Hunter jet post World War II. Sidney Cam has a great career. We're going to talk about him shortly. He is Sidney Cam, and I'll just read this one. Joined Martinsides in 1914. Joined G.H. Handyside in 1921, where they went bankrupt. He then joined Hawker Engineering in 1923. Martinsides went bankrupt in 1921. Handysides go bankrupt, I think, in 1923. Appointed chief designer in 1925. It's 3 years away before he can be considered responsible for this stuff. Made director in 1935. Awarded the British Gold Medal for Aeronautics in 1949. Chairman Technical Board of SPAC 1951 to 53. Knighted 1953 for services to aviation. President of the Royal Aeronautical Society 1954 to 55. And appointed Chief Engineer Hawker Aircraft Ltd. Limited in 1959. Died 12th March 1966. And Sir Thomas Sopwith. Got his aviator certificate number 31, i.e. in 1910. So the 31st qualified pilot in the United Kingdom. Flying competitions in America in 1911. Founded Sopwith Aviation Company in 1913. Chairman and Joint Managing Director of Hawker Companies from 1920. Chairman of SBAC from 1925 to 27. Chairman of Hawker Siddeley Group from 1936. Knighted in 1953. Died in 1989. So Sopwith actually outlived Sidney Cam. They are cool aircraft, and they have very, very good engineers. It is 0.5 inches. That's literally how they've written it. Leonard X-ray. I feel I need a person in a picture. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a picture of a person standing in the picture of a hedgehog. But it is a very big aircraft. I don't have fractions. The hedgehog might be big, but it's cute. It looks like something lovingly built in one's garden shed. Yes. It is literally built in a shed. There's a picture here of Hawker's engineering plant. That's the Gloucester factory. Oh, yeah. This is from slightly later. But it's a picture, I'll zoom in, of the factory they were building in. And it's a bit out of focus there, but the trouble is the focus point is further back towards me. They could have stuck in a bigger engine. But, you know, I don't think it would have made much of a difference. Oh, and do I have that as next aircraft? No, I don't. So, I'm now going to talk about something which is a bit of an aside. I didn't add it into the full aircraft because, well, basically I designed this around two things. One, a presentation, which I might do at some point. Well, a set of videos. Definitely, it's going to be as a sort of not as pre-recorded videos, a long troll. But also, I wanted to sort of have some interesting asides to talk to you all about while we're doing a live. And I thought the interesting one which you might enjoy is that you might want to learn what Denmark's premier fighter it was proposed to be in 1925. And it actually was procured. So, we were earlier talking about the woodcock. Well, they produced a version for Denmark, and they called it the Danecock. I wasn't sure if people would believe me on this one. And so, I had to find a very specific picture and link. Now, the link is going up now. I didn't want to bury the lead earlier. In the description. And hopefully you're going to enjoy this picture when it goes live. This is a Danecock, or Dancock. So this is the Danish version of the woodcock. We've also got, yes, I know. I am a serious historian and I'm finding this funny, but come on. Seriously, they could have had a better name. They could have gone, we're selling you a woodcock. We're selling a woodcock. That is hilarious enough. But no, they decide to go with the Dancock. Or Danecock, depending on whether you're Danish or British. You can still see an example of this in Denmark. And I would like to go see this aircraft because it does look like a cool aircraft. It's also another big freaking aircraft. It is. But its height isn't there. It is 20. It is 10 foot 1 inches high. 10 feet high. That's a single-seater fighter. It's 10 foot high. Afternoon, Jeff. Who doesn't? I believe you because I have independent verification. Shoot me. I think the guy that came at Blackburn and the guy at Hawker that came on the names was the same. Possibly. Oh, good lord. That must have been a real chance to Google research. You do not want to know some of the, if you misspell some of the things that can come up. Yeah, I have all the restrictions because I do military research anyway. I have all the restrictions on my Google search turned off because they automatically filter out gory pictures, etc., and those sort of things. And the trouble is, I sometimes need to see them for my work, so I have that. And typing that into Google was not something I should have done without turning the restrictions back on. It was definitely not something I should have done. I was there a few years ago. It is a great museum. It is. Did they have radios? None of the things I've read about them said they did have radios, but none of the things said they didn't have radios either. I don't think they did have them because at this time radio was still very much tap 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 tap, and if you consider the British to have radios on the Navy, a naval aircraft have a second seat to operate the radio. It's the whole role as a telegraphist, air gunner / observers. Four. Although I did have an interesting conversation with someone the other day who believed that the observers didn't know how to be air gunners. And actually, the observer was trained to be a telegraphist air gunner as well as being an observer. That was part of their role. Telegraphist air gunner was basically the observer training with the observer part stripped out. And my sunglasses, we need an After Dark channel on Discord now. No, we're not getting an After Dark channel on Discord. We do not need an After Dark channel on Discord. Just because of the names of aircraft in the 1920s and 30s does not mean we need it. It might make those of us with a slightly childish sense of humor laugh, but... Now, they're not adapted for carriers. For some reason, they are operated by... So, here is the interesting thing, and the other reason I bring up Bangkok is that they're ordered in 1925. And they wanted to both acquire free aircraft straight from the UK and then produce more under license. Sidney Cam had been appointed and did a limited redesign of the Woodcock. The fuselage was lengthened slightly in vicinity to cockpit, and minor improvements being incorporated in the wings. Span of the upper plane was fractionally increased and the lower plane reduced to give it a higher performance. The Armstrong Siddeley Jaguar 4 was installed, driving a 9-foot 8-inch diameter Watts wooden propeller. The first Danecock, number 151, was flown by Balm on the 15th of December 1925 at Brooklands, being followed by 152 and 153 within a month. All three cleared customs for Denmark in February 1926, although at least one returned to the UK later for engine adjustments. And a licensed version, known as LB2 Dankok, Dankok, rather than Danecock, got underway at the Danish Royal Navy Dockyard Factory in 1927. A further 12 machines being built in the following year. In January 1927, one of the Hawker-built Danecocks set a Scandinavian altitude record of 28,208 feet, a record that would stand for some 8 years. The aircraft was displayed at Copenhagen Aero Show in 1927, while in 1934, Dancocks of the Danish Army Air Service were entered in the Scandinavian Military Aircraft Competition of that year, gaining 5th place in a sizable field of more modern entries. One Army Air Service Squadron and number 2 Naval Squadron were equipped with Dancocks, and due to the failure of the Nimrods to achieve full production status in Denmark in 1934, the Dancock actually remained in service until 1937. Number 158 and that's one of the ones built in Denmark, survived the Second World War, and now lives in the Copenhagen Museum. Its logbook bearing testimony to 704 hours and 5 minutes of flying time, which is a tremendous feat. They were armed with 2 synchronized 7.7 Madsen machine guns with 720 rounds per gun. They could achieve 145 miles per hour at sea level, a cruising speed of 105 miles per hour, and they could get to 10,000 feet in a wonderful 8 minutes and 15 seconds. Melanie 65. Telegraphist air gunner forgetting which key they're on can result in some interesting machine gun bursts. Yep. Albert Zatsky, that's a very good joke, but I'm not answering it. Right. So. Goodbye to our little Danish friend for now. What have we got coming up? And what have we got coming up? Well, today, of course, it's Hawker. Bruchit's 47 on the 9th of May is Age of Sail. Next week we have coal, canals, convoys, and coastal carrying, which is going to be very, very helpful because I know I've received a message from the lovely Paul asking me for the book I was talking about in last week's 4 Random Books, which was about convoys. I'll just mention that here. It's Nick Hewitt's Coastal Convoys 1939 to 1945. That's a very, very good book for coastal convoy research. What else have we got coming up? Well, after tonight, The suggestions for June are going to go live. (16th of May, Bruce 48, Reading History. 20th of May, Patron 24, Dan F's, Tuesday, May the 4th. One has gone in on the 20th of May, mainly to keep it... Well, I thought I wasn't doing May the 4th on the 13th. I just wasn't. And you can see what got scheduled up. I still haven't heard anything back from the National Museum of the Royal Navy about whether they're going to allow me to see M33, but hopefully they are, and hopefully I'll be able to do some direct filming of it. Anyway. Frank Gaspazzo, have you heard of Mark Felton? Yes. If it's the Mark Felton, I think it is. The YouTube naval history, the YouTube historian of the Second World War guy. Yeah. Hmm. Trent Lengo, Dr. Clark, did the Coast Convoy mention RAF's radar support for the convoys? Yes. Anuk, pure humour coming to the fore. Well, you know, it's Hawker and their aircraft, frankly. They don't get much better. And this is me being honest and frank. They don't get much better when it comes to their names. Take care, anime sunglasses. You still have to do County class cruisers. I'm going to be doing them. So here's the Horsley. Yes, this is the Horsley. The Hawker Horsley. And I'm not putting on a random accent for no reason. It is the Hawker Horsley. And the Horsley is an interesting aircraft. It was the last wooden aircraft built by Hawker Engineering. It was built before the Kingston factory facilities of metal production and construction had been completed, so it's all wood. Although the Hawker 2 and later the Hawker 3 did use an all-metal structure. Originally designed by Sidney Cam under the direction of W.G. Carter in 1924, the Horsley, later initially called the Kingston, was a single-engined, two-bay biplane design for Air Ministry Specification 2623, which was aiming apparently to require a standard medium bomber load, a standard medium bomber. It's an interesting aircraft. It was supposed to be a land-based torpedo bomber, pretty much. That's what they were looking for in the Horsley. And they also had specification 2325 and specification 2425. Now, these are added in after 1923 specifications failed. This is quite common. And pretty much the Horsley becomes... How do I put this politely? Well... The Horsley becomes the RAF's answer to the question of, how would you counter a battleship? We deploy Horsleys. They will sweep the seas. Doesn't really work that well. They are good aircraft, and they are good torpedo attack aircraft. They are also massive. And by the way, just before we get into this, there is a Danish government version produced, which is called Dantop. Yeah. I do not know who was naming these aircraft. They either go from the extreme ridiculous to Dantop? Dantop? Really? Anyway. The Horsley is massive and actually later on will serve as the Merlin testbed aircraft. That's a fun thing to have. Yeah. They're just... Yeah. The Horsley is this aircraft which Hawker built. Starts off as a medium bomber, then they refine the specifications. Specifications go through several iterations: 1923, 1925, 1927. This is quite a normal thing you find when looking through these files. We talk about a specification. You do not want to consider necessarily that this aircraft is product of one specification. Could well have been variations of it, could well have been supplied for previous specification. So, it's one of the reasons why aircraft often have a longer gestation period in the 1920s and 30s, and even the 50s and 60s, than we might presume. It's one of the great fallacies you hear about. People go, oh, the F-15, F-35's taken so long to develop compared to previous aircraft. And you go, has it really? Okay, I would tend to quote a specification for the Sopwith aircraft, for the string bag, the Swordfish, from 1933. But there's also a specification in 1931. And as when we were talking about Fairey aircraft and Blackburn aircraft, we were able to show how the Swordfish was an evolution of the aircraft which preceded it, which were evolutions of the aircraft which preceded that, which were evolutions of the aircraft which preceded that, which trace all the way back to the Sopwith Cuckoo, which of course is the company which becomes Hawker. And able to go, well, in the nicest way, can you really claim that this aircraft's development starts in 1930, 1929, whenever, when you can go back and say the previous generations of aircraft are just iterations going forward? You can't. It doesn't. Horsley held an unofficial long-distance record for 2 hours, then Lindenberg's New York to Paris. Yeah. Well, they. I was asking. Well, they didn't make the Hawker, did they? They made the Hawk. Shumi, it probably does not sound as bad in Danish. Possibly. Hang on, no. I know several Danish people. I am fairly sure if I said the word to them, "Dencock," to them, they would laugh at me. Seymour, landing gear interests me. Worked 50 years in AG Aviation, and our planes were fixed gear. Piper used bungee ring loops to dampen touchdown. The Horsley looks like earlier strut. They are pretty darn cool when it comes to their landing on these ones. They need to be cool. They're going to be taking a very heavy weight up and bringing it down, possibly. And Fab, Hawker went back to radials at the end of the proper era with the Centaurus. Yes. They were used for all sorts of tests. So, Horsleys are cool, but They are a specific aircraft, and you realize very quickly they're big aircraft, 13 feet 8 inches, a wing area of 64.4 meters squared, or 693 square feet. Endurance of approximately 10 hours. And capable of taking a 1,500-pound bomb load or 1 torpedo. All up weight when they get airborne of 9,270 pounds in torpedo bomber form. Although they get beaten by the Dantop. The Dantop, when it's all up weight in its seaplane configuration, is 9,420 pounds. Oh my. That is one big lady. And I'm just checking, just going to point out legacy of my father and all those things. I do refer to ships and aircraft as ladies. They carry life. Hope that doesn't upset anyone. Right. I am not Melanie 6040. That's just I'm gonna treat as a serious question. The Dantop has a length of 45 feet 11.5 inches. And the Dancock has a length of 26 feet, 1.25 inches. So it's the Dantop, which is a longer aircraft. Greg Salsi, that thing is about the same size as an Antov and 2 for context. 3 inches taller, in fact. They're about a foot shorter. Rutakowski. I speak Danish and it means what you think. I thought it would. Adfab. They made a Kestrel and Harrier, so had started down the Hawk naming scheme after storms. Actually, you're probably going to see a Harrier in a bit. Well, the Dantop originally had the 800 horsepower Armstrong Siddeley Leopard 2, or the 805 Armstrong Siddeley Leopard 2A. The Horsley had, well, the RAF and Greek aircraft got the 665 horsepower Rolls-Royce Condor 3A engine at the beginning, but eventually ended up getting to Rolls-Royce Buzzards, including the lovely Buzzard 3, the 810 horsepower one, 880 horsepower one, the 810 horsepower Rolls-Royce H10. They also, some were fitted with the Armstrong Siddeley Leopards, and they also got fitted, they tested out the Rolls-Royce PV12s, Merlins C, E, F, and G of 930 to 1,025 horsepower. I'm not sure I want to be in that thing with 1,000 horsepower under the bonnet. I'd be worried about my existence. I honestly would be. I'm now skipping the next aircraft in this book, mainly because it's the Hawker Hawfinch. I am not kidding about the name. You can Google it. And going on to Manly 6040, you are one of my favorite chatters on this, but I am ignoring that question. In car, Hawkins said the engines seem to have completely lost their way by World War II. Yes and no. Yes and no. How do they fall apart? A lot of wire. Right, so, we of course mentioned the Harrier earlier and the Kestrel. Well, meet the first Hawker Harrier! You see, I bet, and this is going to sound strange, I bet a lot of people who watch these videos expect us to still be coming up with new names or reusing old names to be something new. No. We have been reusing names for a long time for aircraft because there are only so many names which sound good but aren't ridiculous for aircraft, i.e., that doesn't sound good or is in any way good. That it's a bird, yes, but no. So meet the Harrier, the first generation. It didn't have Vistal, and honestly, it takes time to service it. Time to roughly altitude is 18 minutes and 30 seconds. So I don't think under any circumstances would the Hawker Harrier be considered fast. Designed to specification 2325 for a day bomber for the RAF. It was so good, well designed, actually, it would fit the 1925 requirements as well. It took 18 minutes and 30 seconds to get to 10,000 feet. Its service ceiling with a torpedo was 13,800 feet. It could get to 20,000 feet without torpedo or any bombs. And it's an experimental two-seater bomber / torpedo aircraft, which Hawker actually put into contest with their own lovely Horsley. In car, interesting to see this Harrier with the RR Pegasus attached. No, it really wouldn't be. This is that would be just scary with this one. Yes, it was a day. That is a link between it and the later Harrier. It was a day bomber. And a strong wind, AdFab and strong wind. I don't think there's any wind strong enough. This thing has an all-up weight of 5,656 pounds. Carmen, sorry, I had to go vote. Glad you went and voted. I hope everyone has voted today. I don't care. Well, I do care who you voted for. I hope the person you selected to vote for has a legitimate long-term plan that actually stands up to the common sense test. But that's all my only ever request for people when they vote, that they vote for someone who has a long-term plan, it stands up to the common sense test. Anyway, I serviced biplanes as a kid. Dangerous two-piece wheels were oversized for rough landing strips. The Harrier's wheels looked oversized and probably stitched outer skin over inner tube. That's just, well, we hope it's that good, not painted on. The Harrier is an interesting aircraft. Oh my. Now, the F-20/27. This is a testbed fighter that uses the 450 horsepower Bristol Jupiter 9-cylinder radial engine, and then later is fitted with the 520 horsepower Bristol Mercury 6 engine. It could get to 10,000 feet in 5 minutes, 5 seconds. It had a service duration of, well, a duration in the air of about 3 hours, 10 minutes, and a total ceiling of 24,800 feet. Now, why is it just called the F-27? 20/27? Well, because it's built to that specification. However, it never gets past that, but it's a test bed for what comes with the future Hawker aircraft. A lot of future Hawker fighters owe their history to this aircraft. Iceman, everyone pointing at Hawker names, but Gloucester Gamecock is pretty good. There are lots of them. We have, as I said, we have done the Blackburns, we have done Fairy. We're now doing Hawker. At some point, we will do Gloucester, and we've done Supermarine as well. Now, I'm now going to approach an aircraft which is interesting. The Hooper. Yep. It goes whoop whoop. No, in more serious note, the Hooper is one of those aircraft which gets forgotten because of its name in part. And I have spelled it's auto corrected it up there to wrong. Give me a second. I'm going to correct that one quickly. I hate Microsoft Word autocorrect. It's the trouble being dyslexic. Microsoft occasionally knows it, says it knows better and decides it knows better. It doesn't know better, but it claims it does. There we go. Hooper. Hooper. Ian Carr. RAF were more responsible for naming aircraft than the manufacturers. Okay, it shifts that way to an extent in the 1930s. But in the 1920s, it's led by the manufacturers to an extent, which is why they start off with the names, etc. At a certain point, the RAF does get involved, but again, the RAF doesn't have as much control as they sometimes market themselves as having control. Now, why is this aircraft interesting? Well, it's a naval fighter. As in the bird, yes. This is what the book itself writes about them. There's always been a tendency to regard naval fighters as possessing a markedly inferior performance when compared with their land-based counterparts. This has usually been attributed to the propensity of drag on a weight-producing accoutrements, specified for deck or catapult operations. And prior to 1927, these design features had tended not only to limit the capabilities of the resulting aircraft, but to dictate the basic structural design itself. Examples are found in the Avro Bison and the Fairey Flypacture. This entrenched belief, together with continued naval preference for radial engines, was further evidenced by the issue of specification number 2126. And any design for this likely to be entirely governed by this requirement was compromised from the outset, despite proposals by H.G. Hawker Engineering Company to utilise the new inline Rolls-Royce FX engine. Hawker's tender, the Hooper, while not in fact a design conforming to N126, was submitted, and a prototype commenced construction early in 1927 as a private venture. No aircraft succeeded in meeting the requirements, but when in 1928 the Hooper was submitted for service assessment at Mardleson, the results of the trials were such that the company was encouraged to pursue development further. At this time, Hooper, of which only one N237 was built, featured a 2-bay wings and uncowed Bristol Mercury 2 engine. But when in 1929 a twin-float undercarriage was fitted for water landing trials at Felixstowe, Hooper was found to be grossly underpowered and an upgraded Mercury 6 was fitted. Subsequently, the N237 was returned to Kingston, where the engine was again changed, this time to an Armstrong Siddeley Jaguar 5 with a tan-end ring. More significantly, however, was the adoption of single-bay wings, and in this guise, N237 found more favour with the aviation pilots at Mardleson. After a return to Brooklands early in 1930, a second ring of small diameter was added, and though the engine was now more efficiently cooled, no increase in performance resulted. The final stage of Hooper's career came later in 1930 when the addition of a 560 horsepower Armstrong Siddeley Panther III 2-row radial, again equipped with concentric tan-end rings. The airframe was also, at this time, generally improved, wheel spats being added and main oleo and tail skid travel being increased. Improving cooling efficiency of the engine led to uprating of the Panther, with the result that a top speed of 196.5 miles per hour was recorded at Mardleson. No mean performance for a heavily equipped radial-engined naval fighter. Nevertheless, service interest was, by the autumn of 1930, no more than academic, since the Nimrod prototype, the Norn, had finally demonstrated the superiority of the Kestrel inline engine, and the Hooper was shelved. N237 did, however, continue development, flying for many months, both at Armstrong Siddeley's and the Royal Aircraft Area Establishment, before being scrapped in 1932. So this is the beginning of the Royal Navy starting to see they could have fighters. Now, this is when I get into an interesting thing. There are two reasons that the specifications for naval fighters are often quite conservative, and naval aircraft are quite conservative. There is a belief that a single engine aircraft, with the weight it's going to have on it in order to do naval operations, is never going to be as good as a land-based equivalent. And that belief is held in the Air Ministry. Strongly. And honestly, you can understand it, because they're going, well, it has to have more, it has to have this, that, the other. That's going to make it more difficult to achieve these things. And the Air Ministry are the ones who tell the Admiralty what's technically possible. Because remember, the Admiralty do not have any direct links with engine industry themselves at this point. So they learn what's technically possible from the Air Ministry. Then they try and write their specifications. And at this point, they have no rear admiral aircraft carriers. So they then write their specification. They then sort of say what they'd like. The Air Ministry turns that into a specification. The Air Ministry then goes and proposes this to the engineering firms, and then the Air Ministry basically conducts the search. So when I see people going, well, the Navy's asking for the wrong things, it's kind of like saying, well, it's like the Navy is a customer in a restaurant. And instead of having a menu from the chef, which the chef has written, the waitress or waitstaff comes up to the customer and goes, this is what I remember us having. This is what we have that I think you might like. And the customer then thinks, well, from what they hear from the waitstaff says they might like, they then make their decision. The waitstaff then goes back to the chef, tells them what the customers required. Chef makes that. Waitstaff takes it out to the customer. Customer probably thinks it's fine, because they know that's what they have, and they're told the price, and that's what they take. They have no ability to check what the waitstaff has told them is correct. They have no understanding. Unless they go and talk to the chef themselves, they have no idea. Without a proper menu being set out, they have no idea what is available. So this is what I find funny when people tell me that the Admiralty is ordering bad aircraft in the 1920s and 30s. They're ordering the same again. And I sit there and go, but how is the Admiralty supposed to know any different? The Admiralty's not the informed customer. They don't have the aero engineers. They don't have the staff to be able to look at it. So they literally have to go for what they're told is available. They're told this is available. This is what's available. This is what your options are. You pick from your options. AdFab, Bristol, the only company to build aircraft and engines. Technically, Hawker builds aircraft and engines, because they actually own Armstrong Siddeley at one point. It's technically a merger with Armstrong Siddeley, but it pretty much takes them over. The Hawker aircraft do look sleek, and the nose design does look good. So this aircraft is interesting because its story is interesting. In many ways, it illustrates the problems. The Royal Navy, the Admiralty, do not know what they're asking for. They're asking for radial engines because they're told these are the most reliable engines. These are the engines which you can most easily maintain. So that's why they're asking for radial engines. They're not told, well, hang on, if you have the liquid-cooled engines, they're a lot more powerful. When they find out the liquid-cooled engines are more powerful, guess what goes in the next generation aircraft? A lot of liquid-cooled engines. But they are more difficult to maintain. So then the next cycle goes back towards radial engines. And the next cycle of that was going to go to liquid engines. This is what happens. Once you have development, you have cycles. Carmen. Also, the Bristol and Company and Rolls-Royce. I will be getting around to Bristol, and I will get around to Rolls-Royce. And they haven't also do aircraft engines. Yes, they do. And Napier, actually, I think, have a go on aircraft design, but thank God they stick to engines. So, next one, the Heart. Now, the Heart I could put in at many points, but I put it in here because whilst the Heart never becomes a naval aircraft, it does have offshoots which do. The Heart is one of those aircraft which, frankly, how do I put it politely? There are so many Hearts actually built that even Hawker doesn't really know how many are actually ever in service. And that's kind of weird when you think about it, but that's because there are various versions built. And if you, the exact answer to that is if you look up the Hawker Heart. There is an entire separate Wikipedia article about operators of the Hawker Hearts and the various variants they operated. An entire separate article. They are operated by Afghanistan. In 1937, the Afghan Air Force is operating 8 of these aircraft. They are operated by the Royal Canadian Air Force, the Royal Egyptian Air Force, the Estonian Air Force, the Finnish Air Force, the British Indian and the British India, so the Royal Indian Air Force, the Persian, or rather the Imperial Iranian Air Force. South Africa operates them. Southern Rhodesia operates them. Sweden operates them. The UK, of course, operates huge numbers of them, as does both the Royal Air Force and the Fleet Air Arm. And then there's also the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. But then there's also the Hawker Audax, which is a variant of the Heart, which is also operated by British India, by Canada, by Egypt, by Iraq, by Iran, by South Rhodesia, by the Straits Settlements. Yes, who are British territories located in Southeast Asia, and they're basically Singapore and that area. United Kingdom, again, for both the Royal Air Force of the Iran. And then there's the Hawker Demon, another variant of the Heart, which is operated by Australia, United Kingdom. Then there's the Hawker Hardy, which is operated by the Belgian Congo Force Publique and the UK and Southern Rhodesia. Then there's the Hawker Hartebees, which are operated by South Africa. Then the Hawker Osprey, which is operated by Portugal, Spain, Sweden, and the Fleet Air Arm. And then there is also the Hawker Hind, which is another variant of it. In other words, there are a lot of these aircraft. And they're just much. I'll be back in a second. Just going to. this is a really, really special aircraft, and a lot of people operate them. Hart looks like a proper Hawker. Actually flew missions during the war, yes. There were some of them still around in World War II. That's a lot of strut wire bracing. They are an interesting aircraft. They are supposed to be able to do dive bombing. Not sure Bristol did any naval aircraft. They proposed a few. Take the top wing off of Hart, enclose the cockpit, and what do you have? Glad you now spotted it. The Swiss tested one Hawker Hind, but were not impressed at all. Yeah, it's a good aircraft, though. I believe South Africa flew Hawker Audaxes in Ethiopia. Yes. I think they did. I would describe the Hind as the Hart Mark II. The family is almost a whole air force, and add in the single seat fighters like the Fury and the Nimrod. Yeah, I'm gonna be getting to that. This is the one reason there are many, many variants of those. No Dane Hart, though. No. Well, honestly, the Danish didn't need it. They had the Danecocks. I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. That's on me. That's me. I should have been able to. They didn't. They didn't need the Hart. They had the There are a few more developments before we get to the Hurricane. This is the outcome. The Hart was the outcome of Specification 1226, issued in May 1926. Now, again, I'm going to turn to this wonderful book. I'm hopefully going to land at roughly the right year. I should have put markers in here, but I always worry about these pages because they're very, very thin paper, and I worry about them. So, the thing that it's actually originally designed for, specification 1226. I can get the right one. High performance bombing land plane. And the options are the Avro 604 Antelope, the Havilland DH-65 Hound, the Fairy Fox Mark II-M, and the Hawker Hart. The air staff required a day bomber to enter service in the near future with a top speed in excess of 160 miles per hour. The high speed and other high performance requirements were regarded by most firms as impossible to attain. However, Avro and Hawker, remember Hawker eventually owns Avro, were each invited to construct a prototype for their competitive trials. And eventually Fairy also received the product, but apparently de Havilland didn't. Oh no, they decided to build it as a private venture. Let's see. The Fairy Fox produced a speed of 189 miles per hour at 16,400 feet. The Hound got to 153 miles per hour at 6,500 feet, so design fail there. The Avro Antelope got to 173 miles per hour at They don't say how high it managed to achieve that speed, so I'm presuming it wasn't high enough. Their eventual order though, to specification 929 when they eventually ordered, and it proves better than all its counterparts. But in the same year, the Royal Navy needs an aircraft, and this leads to 2226 in the same year, the two-seater fighter reconnaissance ship plane. And proposed for this are the Avro Type 595, the Blackburn 2F1, the Fairey Fleetwing, the Handley Page, the Hawker Sea Heart, and the Short Gunnard. Now, to meet the requirements of 2226, the firm modified the original Heart prototype. They included the fitting of a Rolls-Royce FX2 MS engine. Pretty good one. The provision of folding wings with jury straps and twin-float undercarriage. And then they were taken to HMS Furious. Here is the comments of the actual people testing it. The Sea Heart was regarded as superior maneuverability in the air, maintenance and resistance to corrosion. Its waterproofness was described as being superior to that of any seaplane previously tested. The outcome was drafting an issue of specification 1930 for two prototype Ospreys. Here is the interesting thing. The specification for the orders, the original design, is issued in 1926. Testing is done. Specification for the ordered aircraft is 1930. And then that's two aircraft, and eventually they order more. That's naval procurement for you at the time. And it's not the Navy's fault, and much the Navy's fault as it is the fact that you're balancing two ministries. This is half the trouble. We talked today about the difficulties of sometimes getting stuff done in the Ministry of Defense or the Pentagon or various other ministries due to the joint nature of procurement. That's nothing compared to when it was joint with two ministries. Ah, the Deltic engine. What have we got coming up in the long patrols? Battle cruisers take 2 on the 18th of May. I'm looking forward to that. And 22nd to 29th of May, dreadnoughts from around the world. The interesting thing is, it's 18th of May, the battle cruisers. And then dreadnoughts from around the world is coming out. And of course, battle cruisers is going to include some of the dreadnoughts from around the world. But the battle cruiser, as remember, does go into the war years. So there are some slides which will be shared between the two, mainly because I don't have the original battle cruiser slides. Or do I? I do, actually. They're stored from a while ago and I rebuild them. Yeah, that's going to be fun. That's coming up. Right then. Because I did promise someone a walk this evening. Here is the Osprey sitting on a lovely E-Class cruiser. Yeah, where you always want to be. Osprey had an all-up weight of 4,950 pounds. In flip plane mode, 5,570 pounds. Now, this is a fighter made from a light bomber for the Royal Air Force. So let's compare it to the specs for that light bomber. Now, fully loaded, the bombers were 4,554 pounds, i.e., at fully loaded, the bombers were still just under 400 pounds less than the land plane version of the fighter. So there is a lot of stuff stuck in there. The bombers had a maximum speed of 184 miles per hour at 5,000 feet. The Osprey, 185 miles per hour at 13,000 feet. So slightly different orientation, but that's probably good for them. The climb for the bomber, 8 minutes 20 seconds to 10,000 feet. Time to 10,000 feet for the Osprey, 8 minutes 30 seconds. So it's 10 seconds slower getting to 10,000 feet. It's still a good aircraft. And it was designed to be fitted around the fleet at various places. Cal Smith, joint procurement by two ministries. A misadventure of the Panvia Tornado. We can get into worlds with the Panvia Tornado. Paul von Chicago, will the battlecruiser list include the Iowas? Let's put it this way. The Montanas and the Iowas are both super dreadnoughts. And they are definitely post-World War I, and I would argue they are, in many respects, they learn the lessons of the 1930s differently. It's going to sound strange, but with the American later ships, you almost have to take their super dreadnoughts and put them on a battleship and a battle cruiser spectrum. And you would say that the Iowas are more towards the battle cruiser side, and the Montanas towards more the battleships side. But South Dakotas or Montanas? Why is it the Americans name all their ships after South Dakotas? South Dakotas. No, all them after states. I realise it's their thing, but it confuses the life out of people like me. But I wouldn't call the Iowa a battle cruiser, just as I wouldn't call a South Dakota a straight up battleship. What could be built? If you were just building a battleship in that period, even the American style, you would build it slightly different to the South Dakotas. If you were building a battle cruiser in that period, it would not be in Iowa. But I would say they are sort of the functioning orientation of the two designs. I might add that in that sort of discussion. What I find fun is that I have to go back to look at the Osprey beginning, the Hart beginning, but to get to the Osprey, I have to go quite a long way further forward. There is also the Hawker Goshawk and the Hawker Hind, which they produce for the Swiss, which are built by the. So that's who gets the Hart, the Hawker production, the Hind. Mm-hmm. Ugh. So, after initial evaluation in both landplane and seaplane form, Air Ministry Specification 1930 was prepared and a small production contract raised. While production got underway at home, J9052 was taken aboard HMS Eagle, and in company with a number of other British aircraft was actually shipped to Buenos Aires for participation in the British Empire Trade Exhibition early in 1931. Having been flown to good effect at the El Palmar display, the aircraft was, however, damaged while being hoisted back on board the carrier. Thence it was returned to Brooklands for repair, where it continued flying until finally destroyed on 9th May 1931 in a takeoff accident resulting from crossed aileron controls. Production ospreys began to appear at Brooklands in 1932, and in August of that year it was announced that they were to replace the ferry flycatchers aboard Her Majesty's carriers, Eagle and Courageous, as well as equipping the 2nd Cruiser Squadron of the Home Fleet. Early Ospreys supplied the fleet air arm were of conventional construction, employing aluminium and steel tube structures. However, towards the end of 1932, changes were made to a primary structure of stainless steel tube to counter the corrosive effects of salt water and sea air, and fuselage of stainless steel construction was displayed at the Paris Air Show of 1932. The following year, 6 such aircraft were ordered from hawkers for prolonged trials with the Fleet Air Arm. This was the Royal Navy trying to get into the all-metal aircraft arena. So, and please don't take it the wrong way. When I was talking earlier about the Air Ministry and Navy, the Air Ministry weren't necessarily acting in the worst interest of the Navy. They honestly didn't believe the Navy could understand what they were saying, so they were trying to make it as easy for them. And the Air Ministry has, of course, their own prejudices and cultures, but that doesn't mean they're doing a bad job. That means they think they know better. And the trouble is, if you think you know better than your customer, you don't give the customer all the information because you automatically weed down the information so that they will just go the way you want them to, rather than have a constructive discussion with you. Like if I was teaching students. And this isn't my way, but there are some lecturers who are like it, if I want to have a class which just does what I tell them to do, I can give them a set reading which will argue a certain way, whichever book they get, because I can pick out those books quite easily, any academic can, and I will present the information in such a way they can't argue back, because I'll go, this equals this, da 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 da, and make it a very strong case. Now, occasionally you'll come against a student who'll do their own reading and they'll still argue back, but most of the time you'll make your life kind of easy. The odds of an admiral having the time to go and do the research? Not that high. In fact, the Royal Air Force has the most trouble when it ends up with Admiral Blackhouse as 3rd Sea Lord, and then later on a guy called Admiral Henderson as 3rd Sea Lord. 2 admirals who do go and do their own research. But they are rare. They are rare. That's the trouble. The other way you can present, and the way I always hope I present, is you give people all the information, you try and make it as fair and even as possible, and you are then sarcastic xenophobic. No, not at all. You're there, you just, you accept that the students, people listening, are supposed to be able to come to their own opinions. And they might not always agree with you. That's great. Because in the end, if you're a history lecturer, your purpose isn't to teach people what to think. Your purpose is to teach them to think. What were the lessons of the 30s exactly? The lessons of the 30s, as was seen in a lot of exercises, was the need for speed to keep up with the aircraft carriers and the need for better air defense as aircraft started to appear more and more in the exercises. Precisely. Enterprise. Yes, she's aboard Enterprise. E-class. Anyway, well, there was one battleship not named for a state. Special name in Naval Law, the Slayer of the Alabama. Kearsarge. Paul from Chicago, South Dakota. Lots of senators, few voters, far from the sea. Name a ship after a small population states and get wives to break champagne to get votes for ships. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just ospreys are so critical. You cannot overstate them. They are, in many ways, they come in. They are the Royal Navy's first fighter, which they really start developing their fleet and fighter control tactics and the ideas for them. And you have to remember they don't have radar at this point. They have tap 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 radar, a radio. And so Morse code sort of systems that they're using. So they're really sort of trying to develop this in the when the technology hasn't matured it. They've got destroyers out as pickets, or Blackburn, or other larger three-seater aircraft up as some sort of aerial reconnaissance aircraft, and that's how they're spotting for the enemy. And they're hoping it's all down to the Mark One eyeball. And this is the fighter which first starts to really experience the Royal Navy trying this. And it doesn't work. It works, but it doesn't work. It's going to sound strange. Sometimes it manages to intercept enemy bombers, and they see how good it is when it does break up the attacks. That really is good. However, it's not that great. And that's where you start to get both the armored carrier, the armored flight deck, the armored hangar carriers, the illustrious class. The idea starts to percolate, because when this is, of course, coming in and just entering in service, the rear admiral aircraft carriers is Admiral Henderson. And then after that job, he goes on to become a third Sea Lord. So the Osprey cannot be overstated as how critical it is in the development of the Royal Navy as it serves in World War II. There is a lot of love for Deltics going on at the moment in my chat. I'm not ignoring it, but if we get into the design of trains as well, I'm going to be officially very, very far off topic. I can sort of justify naval aircraft on this channel. Well, I can, because I only have to justify it in the end to myself. But Nimrod. Nimrod. So, it is gorgeous. It is a very good-looking aircraft. And the fact that it's surviving, if you want to go see one at Duxford, you can. It's one of those aircraft also which in this book is helpfully hidden in another aircraft. So which makes it fun to try and find. Mm-hmm. Audax, it comes after that, it comes after the Hardy. I should really just copy and paste out the book, but I like doing it from the book because I like to show that I'm using that the book is the source of information. I don't like to try sort of pretend I'm some sort of person who knows everything off the top of my head. Because I'm not. I am. I'm an academic. Yes, I do the study, but I do not know everything off the top of my head as much as I'd love to. Some things I know a lot off the top of my head, but I am not some kind of super duper star as much as I'd love to be. Tiger. Resembles the Hurricane, at least at the front. I always think actually that the Hawk and Nimrod all sort of resembles a Porsche, but that might be me. The Nimrod ended service in 1932 and served with number 408 flight on aboard HMS Glorious. But in a rather interesting turn up for fate, this one did go to serve with the Danish Navy. Okay. I'm gonna have to pronounce. I'm gonna pronounce its name now, and I don't want anyone to giggle. It's the Nimrodon. Nimrodon. Spelt Nimrod and Dern. The 8 survivors of the aircraft they built became German war spoils in 1940. The IJNAS also received one. That was the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service. The Portuguese Air Force got them. Several Royal Navy squadrons were formed around them. And pretty much the Nimrod is this sort of aircraft which comes in at the same time as the Osprey. And is alongside the Osprey in that the two fighters which the RN has in service at the same time are the same aircraft. And yes, this is the original Nimrod before later on you have the Hawker Siddeley Nimrod, which is of course the long-range maritime patrol aircraft, which is made from the Comet. Nimrodon, if anyone was wondering. Greg, you haven't got the line between down the O. I don't know what it is with the Danish and the Hawkers, but the Danish seem to love the Hawker aircraft. They do. The Danish love the Hawkers. Oh. Now, the next aircraft which comes up for some reason, and I've just realised it's come up completely out of order, is the Dantop, which I was talking about earlier, but there's a picture of her. The Dantop. Hang on, or is it the Dantop? No, the lovely people in the lovely autocorrect have managed to make it wrong again. I hate Microsoft Office sometimes. I really do. Ay, caramba. But there's a picture of the Dantorp, the Danish torpedo bomber. Cute looking aircraft. Anyway, let's get on to the Hurricane. Or rather, I've changed it to the Sea Hurricane. Now, although the stats there are for your average Hurricane, but that's because finding the actual stats for the Sea Hurricane in this book have proved interesting, and honestly, they seem to be not that dissimilar, although they keep playing around with them. No accurate, and this is the book itself says this. No accurate figures exist as to the exact number of Sea Hurricanes delivered. For apart from a very few newly built aircraft, large numbers of Hurricanes were returned from the RAF for conversion. Moreover, other modification work was undertaken at Fleet Air Arm shore establishments at home and abroad. Following the experience of Number 46 Squadron during the Norwegian campaign of May 1940, in which Hurricanes were successfully taken off and landed aboard the aircraft carrier Glorious, the steadily increasing Allied shipping losses in the Battle of Atlantic prompted the order for modification of the Hurricane to suit it for shipboard operation, an order characteristically endorsed by Mr. Winston Churchill himself early in 1941. The first Sea Hurricane, a modified Mark I, with catapult spools and arrestor hook, was delivered onto Farnborough in March 1941, though the following 50 machines, known as Sea Hurricane Mark 1As, did not feature hooks. It was proposed that the merchant ships were to be equipped with catapults on their bows, and on appearance of enemy aircraft, the Hurricane was to be launched to intercept. 35 such ships, known as CAM ships, catapult or aircraft merchantmen, were so modified, and the first, the SS Michael Lee, set sail on the 27th of May 1941. Unfortunately, however, the Michael Lee was torpedoed and sunk before the Hurricane could be launched. This goes back to a very simple idea the RN has had since the birth of aircraft, basically. The best form of air defense you can mount on a ship is not guns, it's not smoke, it's a fighter. I.e., yes, I can put more machine guns and other guns on my ship, but by the point at which they're engaging the enemy, they're already getting to the point at which they're going to be engaging me. That's a problem. However, if I have a fighter, that will go up and break up their attack and possibly take them out, because it'll be far easier for it to kill them from up there than it will be from me shooting up there from down here. So this is the birth of the CAM carrier. Oh. Peter Dawson, there was enough variation between different marks of Hurricanes that adding an arrestor hook hardly matters. That's my theory, anyway. And also, I have a theory as to why there's no standardization for this. Because the freaking Fleet Air modified them shamelessly. I mean, there is a picture in a book, in an archive, and I think it's in the Churchill archives, but I can't remember. I haven't found a picture, but I am sure it was illustrating a Sea Hurricane mounting a single barrel 40mm pom-pom. 2-pounder, which had been mounted on it on the center line. And I can find nowhere can I find a memory of that aircraft. But this is the Royal Navy. That's 40mm pom-poms. They had a lot of them going around. The Royal Navy likes to modify things. I can remember. I can see it clearly in my eye. I'm sure I took a picture of it. I'm 90% sure it's in the books, which are in the Roskill section of the Churchill Archives notes. Churchill Archives. But I can't find it anywhere. Jeff Beeler, since the Channel Islands are not part of the UK, could they join the EU? No, they're British overseas territory. They are part of Britain. I don't know why, Jeff, you're bringing up that topic at the moment in this discussion. Mosquito's been chosen for the UK's law wingman. I think it has been. Ah, that's probably because Dirt's gotten Carl. Situation is not probably not escalate much. Jersey will fold because France. I doubt Jersey will fold because it's about the success of their own fishermen, and the French have already backed off. That's off topic though. Javier, did the camera ships really need landing gear? They would be faster without the weight. Honestly, the landing gear wasn't much of a problem, and there was always the idea that if they were actually launched close enough to land, they could go and land somewhere. Did the Hurricanes have more luck with the early 20mm wing-mounted cannons than Spitz? Yes, and it was because of their thicker wing. That's good. The Channel Lines are crown dependencies and not overseen territory. Yes, they are. There is a small difference in that one, and that does make them, part of Britain. It's a weird thing, but in the nicest way, the British government isn't going to back down over that one. It's an easy win for them for the fishing politics. Now, after these cam ships, there then comes the Mac ships. Sea Hurricane 1Bs were embarked on from October 1941 on board a converted merchant ship called Mac ships. These vessels were provided with a small flight deck on which were parked their limited complement of fighters and anti-submarine aircraft. They had no hangar for the aircraft to be maintained in, and were pretty much designed for the PQ convoys to Russia. But let's be honest, trying to maintain an aircraft on the PQ convoys to Russia with no hangar frankly, is worthy of a very big medal. The Sea Hurricane Mark 1C followed the 1B into service in February and March 1942. This employed the new Hurricane 2C aircraft as a base type with four cannon wings, and they were late series converted Hurricane 1s to this standard. Interesting enough, it then brings up, of course, 1942 saw Sea Hurricanes, mostly 1Bs and 1Cs, serving aboard large fleet carriers Indomitable, Eagle, and Victorious. I'm not sure Eagle can be called a large fleet carrier. Equipping numbers 800, 801, and 885 squadrons respectively. These aircraft, in company with ferry full miles and ground martlets, formed the air defence of the vital convoys which sailed for Malta in August that year. During the voyage that followed, the 70 carrier-borne fighters endured 3 days of continuous attack by as many as 500 German and Italian bombers, torpedo bombers, and their escorts. 39 of the enemy were destroyed for a loss of only 8 naval aircraft, although Eagle was torpedoed and sunk by U-boats. One pilot, Lieutenant R.J. Cork, alone claimed 6 enemy aircraft. Sea Hurricanes? Cool. That's good. From what I understand, Jersey and France have come to a preliminary understanding on sorting out a mess. Yes, I think it's basically been a case of these are our standards. They are the international standards for safe and happy fishing. We're all supposed to be applying them. Vivian, when did the Iron get Hurricanes of 20mm cannon, and when with bombs and when with rockets? Again, we're not exactly sure. Theoretically, the cannon are introduced with the 2C in 1942-ish. But, well, no, with the 1C, which was the Mark 2C. Because the Sea Hurricane Mark 1C is a variant of the Mark 2C Hurricane. Let's put it this way. There are lots and lots of Hurricanes produced, and honestly, they're just churning them out. And they go where they go. And the Fleet Air Arm is fitting everything with everything it can as quickly as it can. Lots and lots of Hurricanes produced. That's good. My understanding for the Hurricanes given for can launchers was they were generally ones so far past their usefulness would otherwise be canalized parts. I think that's pretty much the aim was for it, but you sometimes do get some aircraft turning up which are turned into cam aircraft and they're going, that could have been useful. But also you have to remember they're converting a lot of Hawkers. A lot of Hurricanes get evolved and added to as they go on. And a lot of them have a lot of work done on their airframes. So, final aircraft, because it is almost 9 o'clock and I did promise someone a walk, is the Sea Fury. So I'm skipping the Typhoon and the Tempest. And the reason I'm skipping the Typhoon and Tempest is whilst the Royal Navy did consider going for naval variations, it's kind of like the Tornado. They considered it, but, you know, they didn't go for it. And by the way, I'm talking about the Hawker Tornado from roughly 1937. About the time the first production... this is just a note about the Typhoon, though. About the time the first production Hurricanes were nearing completion at Kingston in 1937, Hawker design team was anticipating a requirement for successor, and by the time specification F-1837 was issued, much work had already been done. The new aircraft was to be a 12-gun interceptor powered by either the Rolls-Royce Vulture or Napier Sabre. 24-cylinder engines, and from the start, design work on both installations continued in parallel. That is the source of the Typhoon. So, Typhoon starts out in 1937-ish, possibly 1936-ish. Having regard to the disappointing debut of the Typhoon at the end of 1941, it's perhaps surprising the Tempest ever survived the project stage of its career. Survived did, however, to become one of the most effective Allied fighters in World War II. Basically, the Tempest is an even more hawkery aircraft. But you next up have the Fury. Now, this is first specified... well, it's first started. Well, the first Tempest prototype was flown in 1942. And then they wanted to see if they could make a lighter and smaller version of Tempest by eliminating the wing center section and bringing the outer wing sections together on the aircraft centerline. The design is known first as the Tempest Light Fighter and eventually as the Fury. The Fury doesn't work for the Air Force. They're happy with the Tempest. However, it then evolves into the Sea Fury. This beautiful beast of an aircraft. The Sea Fury starts to go to sea in 1946 for testing. So it's basically a development program of 3 years in war. Less than that when you consider it starts out as the Fury and only evolves into the Sea Fury along the way. It went through a lot of trials and involved everything they could throw at it, which meant that when it came into service in 1948, the Sea Fury, Mark 11, as it was called, the Royal Navy procured 615 of these aircraft alone, making them the most populous aircraft procurement of the Royal Fleet Air Arm post-World War II. And that's not including trainers and various other secondary aircraft. The Sea Fury is critical. And it all goes back to, this is sort of, if you consider the survival of Hawker post World War II is down to the Admiralty's orders for Sea Fury. They almost have the same problem as Sopwith does. But thanks to Sopwith did, but thanks to the Sea Fury orders, they keep going. That's good. The Cam Hurricanes were also semi-useful for a pilot with a plan that the RAF says no to. They can test the plan on the Hurricane being sent to the Merchant Navy because it's already considered an airframe lost by the RAF and DM in the street because it's going to end up in the drink. Theory. Theoretically. I was asking, Sea Fury looks so similar to Typhoon and Tempest that at first I thought it's just a sea upgrade. Well, to be honest, let's see. The Typhoon is evolved into the Tempest to an extent, and the Sea Fury is the lightened Tempest. They are really evolutions of each other. Sea Furies shot down MiGs over Korea. That they did. These are some of the most successful aircraft of all time operationally. And they're cute. Let's be honest, the Sea Fury is a good-looking aircraft. It's a sad shame that so few are left in the world after so many were built. The first unit to receive the FB-11 was number 802 Squadron Ellington in May 1948. Numbers 801, 824, 825 and 807 Squadron soon followed, embarking in the light fleet carriers Ocean, Theseus and Glory during 1949-51. The outbreak of war in Korea in June 1950, led to the dispatch of Theseus with number 807 Sea Furies. These aircraft being used with considerable skill in the ground support role, with the result that Ocean and Glory followed several months later. Another vessel carrying Sea Furies into action in Korean waters was HMAS Sydney of the Royal Australian Navy. For a number of ex-Fleet Air Arm Sea Furies have been transferred to that service during 1949-1950, and others are supplied to the Royal Canadian Navy, which almost also ends up taking them to Korea. The Sea Furies of Theseus first went into action in North Korea on 7 December 1950, thereafter attacking enemy targets with bombs, rockets, and napalm. On occasion, they used to sow mines outside communist ports. Here's the thing. Inevitably, as enemy fighter strength grew, these naval formations came under fire from Russian-built MiG-15 jet fighters. And though several Sea Furies were lost, the Hawker machines destroyed a number of the enemy, first being claimed by Lieutenant P. Carmichael of No. 822 Squadron. In November 1951, Sea Fury FB-11s were introduced into service with the Royal Navy Volunteer Reserve. Imagine that, being a Royal Navy Volunteer Reserve Fleet Air Arm pilot and getting to fly a Sea Fury. That's like, yeah, I served in World War II and I'm now a regular pilot. It's just flying airliners. It's just air. What do you do getting on the weekends? I get to fly a Sea Fury. Those are that's the recruiting days. Oh, gorgeous aircraft. Sadly enough, the Danish didn't buy any. And 6 Mark 20 trainers were ordered by the Dutch Luftvaart Beratungsdienst during 1959 for towing, to support the Luftwaffe as target towing duties. Sad times. They're good aircraft. Now, I'm going to stop there because, frankly, if I get into the Hawker jets, then I'm going really, really far ahead out of the 1920s and 30s. And honestly, the Sea Fury is probably stretching it. But my theory was, as they start off with the Typhoon, then go through the Tempest to the Sea Fury, and the Typhoon is ordered in 1937, technically. Might have started development in 1936. I could stretch up to the Sea Fury. There was no Dane Fury, sadly enough. JPL, the Sea Furies are brutes and a handful to fly. They weren't easy to fly, no. But they rewarded pilots who loved them. Yeah, I have to say, with the Tribals Battles and Darings, I'm not sure I'm wondering. I haven't had this communicated to me, but I know another author who's been told their book's been delayed because they don't think they can go on a book tour till September, and the publishers want them to go on tour. But Pen and Sword haven't talked to me about going on a book tour, so I have no idea. I thought it was coming out at the end of May. I love the Sea Fury's propeller. The last generation in UK pop planes simply had better propellers. They are good. I have to agree with you on finding a good book comparing and contrasting World War II propeller technology. I don't think there really is a good book. There are some okay books, and there's some good attempts, but there isn't not really a book which I would wholeheartedly endorse as. There is one very good book, but it's only very good if you already have basically a degree in engineering. There is another one which is very good pictures, but it doesn't really tell you anything other than this is a wooden propeller. It's finding the right balance. Calvin, where can I visit this beautiful plane? Usually, you can see a Sea Fury. Well, you can see them in some of the Australian Naval Aviation Museum. You can see one usually. One is owned technically by Navy Wings and does flying in the UK, but there's also one inside Yeovilton. I think there is one also on display sometimes at Duxford, but I haven't seen it there recently. And there's one in Canada, I think. Anuk, many of the superprops didn't get into production before the Super World War II ended. No, they didn't. But honestly, you have to consider when World War II ends, the propeller aircraft are at the peak of their capabilities. They're reliable as anything. You've got jet aircraft coming up, but they're nowhere near a mature technology. Jet aircraft are the coming technology. They're cool, they're lovely. They are not the mature technology. So that's why you have the superprops come into service, because they're covering the gap. Abzowski, why is the Tempest kind of forgotten? I have no idea why the Tempest is kind of forgotten. I would say the Tempest is a far better aircraft than the Typhoon, but Tempest gets forgotten. There is lots of reason. There is an interesting point made that the Hurricane gets remembered because the Spitfire is remembered, and people therefore forget the Hurricane, and then there's a lot of people writing about the Hurricane to try and correct that false narrative. So that's why the Hurricane gets remembered. The Typhoon is this aircraft which comes in later in the war and is really, really critical. But because it's the big roaring one, it's kind of like the Spitfire to the Tempest. And the Tempest is sort of the Hurricane. But the trouble is the Typhoon doesn't have the popularity and overwhelming dominance that the Spitfire does. Because of the Spitfire. So therefore the Tempest doesn't get the backlash the Hurricane enjoys. That would be my working theory. And I would argue the Thunderbolt doesn't get anywhere near as much attention as the Mustang. The Mustang you can type into Google and you will get bazillion results. The Thunderbolt just a couple of million. Come on, that plane needs to be beautiful for its present role. Well, it does. And let's be honest, Sea Fury. Yeah, if I can do it with a mousepad. Was rather beautiful. And those are some Canadian ones, yes. Because I thought the maple leaf should be on display. Very sassy. The UPG channel, Greg's Airplanes and Automobiles, quickly mention no relation, he's American. You sure, Greg? Are you sure? Has a very good 3 or 4 part series on propellers. I'll have to look it up. Anuk, that was the Navy Wings one, which crashed a while back as well. Callum Gasman, re Superprops and mature tech. Kind of same with, we still iterate on F-16, F-18 because the F-35 stealth and sensor fusion is not mature and former might be of limited use. Pretty much. It's often the sensible way to go. It's why you keep the older tech in service. It's one of the interesting things is that there'll be a transition period where technologically the Type 26 is probably the best anti-submarine warfare frigate the Royal Navy possesses. But they won't be the best ASW frigates the Royal Navy possess, because that will be some Type 23s, because their crews will be really worked up and really know their stuff. And because they've been using it for years, so they know all its problems, they know all its quirks. Because no matter how good your technology is, it will have quirks. You will build it, it will work one way on paper and in theory, it will work another way in reality. It always does. There might be a dud fitting somewhere, and until you learn those quirks, it won't be as good as it can be. And that's the transition from one type of ship to another type of ship, which are really not that different. Considering the upgraded Type 23s have a lot of the technology which is going into Type 26s. But when you're talking about transitioning from propeller aircraft to jet aircraft, you're changing the entire operating characteristics of the aircraft you're flying. Flying a jet is nowhere near the same as flying a propeller aircraft. You have to handle it very differently. It's like going from driving a steam train to a electric engine. It's handled differently. Driving an electric car to driving a four-wheeled petrol car, four-wheel drive petrol car. There is a difference. There is a difference in how you handle it. There's a difference in how you handle the electricity, how you handle the engine, how you build up speed. Because you can drive an electric car incredibly inefficiently and find it's terrible and never run. It's always using fuel up, and you can the same driving would probably get quite efficient in a petrol car. You have to learn how to handle the different systems differently. And it takes time. Adfab. Tempest versus Spitfire is like Beaufighter versus Mosquito. That's good. By the time the Tempest entered service, it didn't have the glamour of dogfights over London and the southeast that the Spitfire and Hurricane did. True. Aviator Enterprise. I think in the case of P-47, looks play a role. Yeah. Let's be honest, the P-47 looks like it should be one of the big cats. The Thunderbolt looks like it should be in the Wildcat, Hellcat, and Bearcat, stable. That's where it belongs. It's a huge aircraft built around a huge engine. It's gorgeous, but it's a functional gorgeous. Let's be honest. I am the person who gets into trouble regularly because if I have to describe say if I'm picking out my favorite the aircraft I think is the best looking aircraft in World War II, I tend to pick the Hellcat because I think she's gorgeous. But the vast majority of people go Spitfire or something else like that, and they just think I'm insane. But to me, what the Hellcat achieves, the operational capability, the sheer firepower, what it brings is amazing. Even amongst naval people, they tend to go with the Corsair, and I love the Gullwings. The Gullwings are great, but there is the Hellcat is the beauty for me, and in many ways, I prefer an aircraft which isn't actively trying to kill its pilot every 5 minutes. No, it's including. Especially with early jet engines, you have a massive lag on throttle input until the engine responds. Yep, you can say that again. And twice on Sundays. Escort. I think it's also about what people remember seeing. The public in the UK saw the Mustang flying over escort bombers, but the P-47 wasn't seen as much as it had shorter range. Reflying jets versus props. Funny enough, the ME-262 got critics because the jet's slow response compared to the Daimler-Benz V12. Yeah. I know, you all love the Corsair, but I'm sticking with my Hellcat. Hellcat, only because the P-47 had been navalized. The Hellcat would have eaten the P-47 for breakfast. Because, let's be honest, the P-47 was not great at ground attack, and half the Hellcat job was doing ground attack as well as being a fighter. And it had to be good at both. Andrew Ben, I'm a Firefly fan. There's always one. Yeah, the Fireflies and the Fulmars and the Fireflies, they're good. They are lovely looking aircraft. Let's be honest, if you're coming into land on a carrier, you'd prefer to be in a Hellcat than a Corsair. Yes, you might be able to crank the turn and turn round into the carrier and hope you can keep an eye on that flight deck the whole way down, but the Hellcat's better. Canada has a Sea Fury at Rockcliffe and Ottawa. Cool. Excuse me for earlier, the little burp. That's good. Because if a pilot threw the throttle open in emergency as they would in a prop, the jumbo engines would flame out if you're lucky, or burst into flames if you weren't. So this is why you have the super props. And honestly, the reason they're not pushed on in World War II is because you don't need them at the end of World War II. There aren't really that many great Japanese or German aircraft around. You can afford to slow down development and get them coming in post-war. Because everyone knows you will need aircraft post-war to cover you till the jet aircraft come of age, because they're all looking at it going, oh, they're the future, they're great. Not great right now. Okay. Kangason, the jug, as not as good in Grand Attack, is a sentence I heard first from you. Yeah. Sorry, P-47, not as good as the Hellcat. It was very, very good, but the Hellcat was superior on that one. Mainly because to navalize the P-47 would have completely wrecked its performance, actually, in many respects. I love the P-47, it just, no. Seriously, how about a Spiteful? No. 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 You see, I'm conversed, because in my head, the image I have for what would have been the Seafang, or Seafire, whatever it's would eventually been called, the gull-winged sort of Spitfire type that was being built by Supermarine for the Fleet Air Arm. In my head, if that aircraft had come into service, that's probably the one which would be my favourite. Because on all the face of it, it looks like it would have been a world-beating aircraft. I mean, they were talking a really, really big, powerful engine. One of the later Merlins or early, they were going between the Sapiers and the Napier Sabres and the Griffins. The Griffins, the Rolls-Royce Griffins. That would have been, if that had entered service in 1941, that would have changed World War II, I'm fairly sure. That thing would have eaten Italian attacking aircraft in the Mediterranean for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and just gone, hello, are any of you still alive? No. We're all grounded. Oh, you have ground attack rockets, right? And we're all at lunch. Please don't hit us, mamas here. I don't know, it's just, that is when you look at the specs that Supermarine were working on for that aircraft, and I have a sneaking suspicion they weren't the only company working on. I'm fairly sure, I know about Supermarine, but my other suspicion is that if anyone else is working on it, it's Hawker. Because Hawker gets the contract for the Sea Fury quite quickly. Almost as if the Royal Navy knows what they've been working on and have had maybe a sort of shadow project going on with them at some point. Hello, Counterface. Yeah. The P-47 carried 3,000-pound bombs in the casserole in combat. The Hellcat could carry a pair of 500-pound ones. All true. Still, Hellcat was better. You can carry 3,000-pound bombs, but can you take off and land them? Can you take off with them from an aircraft carrier and drop them on your target and get the target and get back to your carrier? I prefer the Hellcat, and it's better. Trentanga Reata, the P-47 wasn't seen as much as it had shorter range. The P-47 outranged the Mustangs, and the P-47D-25 onwards had a 600-mile radius of action in February 44 with 3 drop decks. Cool. Too much. I like Reno Airshow and watching Bearcats. War ended, so it never got accolades it could have gotten. Fast and simpler to build compared to all the others. Yeah, Bearcat is a good aircraft. Derp Squad, I remember stories about PT crews acquiring the wings of damaged Hellcats and jury-rigging 650mm cannons in a mount and trying to find enough ammo to say this first. Slating that thing's first will be fun. Greg Sadati. Eric Brown and some colleagues had to fly Arado jets back to the UK from Germany with no idea how much of the 25 life hours was left on the Junos. Yeah, Brown is, frankly, and his colleagues are very, very brave. He also gets in one of those comets, the flying rocket aircraft. Imagine if they get that back to the UK. I don't think he flies it most of the way. I think he manages to get it back to UK lines and it's transported the rest of the way. I was asking, I really like the Kawanishi N1 and K1J Shiden. The A6M is also especially compared to Wildcat and Buffalo. Western World developed with 2 Merlins. That was a good aircraft. Nighttime Production. Can we do an expanded case study on that ideal Seafire scenario? The what if we have that in 1940? I have considered doing that working on that with probably with Drac, because I doubt Jamie would want to be involved in that one. Although we are getting him round to it because we've shown him now enough data about it. He's sort of going, well, he's a bit annoyed. I think he would have liked that one. You know how passionate he is about the Fleet Air Arm. He sees that as the fighter being developed to go along with the armored carriers, and yeah. Comments, re-Hellcat. So only because the B-47 wasn't navalized. If the B-47 had been navalized, it wouldn't have held up the Hellcat. And fact, why did the USN keep the Corsair but retire the Hellcat? Because they had the Bearcat. You only need one big cat in service at a time. If you have 2, it gets confusing. And the cats might... Who knows what those cats might get up to? We all know if you have far too many breeds of cats in one hangar or one home, it can get interesting. Good Dawson, the Hawker Fury was a simplified Tempest. As I said earlier, it wasn't really a simplified Tempest. It was a Tempest with its wings shortened. And the Sea Fury is a navalized version. Yeah, although it goes through so many evolutions, the Sea Fury really it doesn't look as much like that lightened Tempest on end. It's been Mackie 205 was nice to look at. Yeah. Money 16040. Are you familiar with ME262? They're restoring to flight sets the original Jumo 004s. I think I've heard the same discussions you probably have, and I wish them luck. I personally would not want to go up in an aircraft with the original Jumo 004s. Derp Scott, rearranging P-47 at the same time that the P-51 had a combat range of about 1,000 miles with tanks. P-47 could never do a middle stint of the bomber escort, guarding the bombers to Berlin from England. Regardless, Greg made a video about P-47 could reach Berlin if used correctly. Greg used My Chicago Boys columns as most of his source material. It's an interesting debate going on about P-47 versus Mustang. P-51 versus P-47. Again, I think the P-51 was definitely not as good in the ground attack role as the Hellcat. And P-47, I will grant the heavier bomb load, but I still think the Hellcat was better in that performance. They did far more, and they did a lot. Right. So, it's close to 9:30. Good Lord. I will say thank you, everyone, and I will answer some final questions. And then I'll be finished doing. Thank you, everyone, for the super chats. Thank you, everyone, for the likes. Thank you, everyone, for the subscriptions who has subscribed. Thank you for everyone who's pressed the little bell down there if you want to hear, get the update when these things are on. And thank you for everyone who's made last year so much fun, and may there be many more years after this. And thank you to everyone who's joined the Discord and Patreon, who's supporting this channel, this work. Thank you. It's very kind of you. And I will endeavour to keep it improving. Then on the layer, the one thing, a great thing about the P-37 was the ability to eat lead and still fly. Comparable in that regard to the L2, I'd say. I'd agree, but I also think the Hellcat was just as good, if not better. Sorry, I admit I'm a Hellcat fanboy. I am. I love the Hellcat. And thank Dylan Laird, thank you Melanie1640, thank you Sean Mack for adminning this evening, thank you Darius Radatsky, thank you Carmen Gasberg, thank you Albert Zaski, thank you John Shea, thank you Rick Sava, thank you Greg Sarsky, thank you DG40, thank you Aviator Enterprise, thank you Roland Cash, thank you Trent Lenko, thank you Paul Johnson, thank you Ian Carr, thank you Dirt Squad, thank you Calvin Gasberg. You're only expected to survive 20 hours in the air due to Mustangs, so 25-hour engine lifespan is good. The trouble is, it's an average of a 25-hour engine lifespan, so let's be honest, it could be a lot less, or it could be a lot more. Take care, Nook. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Peter Dawson. Thank you, everyone. Take care. And have a nice evening, and Ian Carr, don't think the FAA could get many Hellcats. They got a fair number. They take care, Cowtyface. And Ian Carr. And Melanie640, they spent millions on having new parts, turbine blades made of modern alloys and such for the zero falls for better reliability. But, okay, but I'll still let someone else fly in it. And if they wouldn't mind giving me their flight plan, I will make sure I am within only good binocular range of it. Take care, everyone. Night, and thank you.